So welcome to everybody. Thank you for joining me once again. I've been thinking about where did I want to go with tonight's talk. And I did a quick skim through the How to Make Life Meaningful book to see if I was going to be on target with what I was thinking about. And I want to continue on with the theme that I was talking about last week, if that's okay with everybody. And I'm not going to put anybody on the spot. There's no homework assignment. But if you have any questions or thoughts about what I'm talking about, then then please feel free to chime in, ask a question, raise your hand. Somebody else just joined us, so I'm going to change the attendance. My wife is usually here sitting in the background, so she just wandered into the living room, so she counts as somebody who's attending. Question? No. Okay. Right. So last week I was focusing on this idea of doing meditation practice as a way of understanding dependent arising. And Lama Zopa talks about very extensively, talks about various things you can do to develop bodhicitta mostly in regards to these kind of practices, walking with bodhicitta, eating with bodhicitta, cleaning yourself with bodhicitta, going to sleep with bodhicitta, going to the toilet with bodhicitta. That one's very interesting. And on and on. But I was talking about this in a broader picture as a way of thinking in general about how to go about making the events of daily life meaningful, intelligible, and developing both wisdom and a sense of compassion through this kind of practice. And the way I describe it is, it sounds kind of like an intellectual practice, and actually that's kind of a little bit of the way in which Lama Zopa describes it. So for example, if you're taking a walk, which is one of the examples that he uses, and you begin to reflect intellectually about the situation you're in, that you're on a sidewalk, for example, and some people poured the concrete for that sidewalk. Some engineers, laid out a plan for the sidewalk. There are people who clean the sidewalk. All these bits of things, events have to fall into place for there to be. So if you're walking down the street, if you're walking on the sidewalk, there are all these actions that they had to come together from other people for there to be a sidewalk and for you to be able to walk on the sidewalk. So you can think about that. But in my experience, what I found is that there are actually kind of more powerful ways to do this sort of practice. And I think that food, preparing food, buying food, eating food, thinking about where does food go in its own way, is one of the most powerful ways to do this meditation. I mean, that's just been my personal experience. That doesn't mean it's the only, but it's been very strong for me. Because with every bite of food, you can see yourself as being in relationship with a complex chain of causes and conditions which has provided your nourishment. And we have a much more stronger, that's great, yeah. We have a stronger connection with food than with strolling down the sidewalk or driving your car someplace or what have you. Now, of course, this requires that you use your imagination as well as sort of the intellectual function of your mind. And so that might seem like being unmindful if you're doing this. So, for example, if you're eating, well, I had peas for dinner, so I'll use that as an example. If you're eating a spoonful of peas, and you think about how the peas came to be on that spoon, you have to use your imagination and you have to use your mind. I mean, you might remember the bag of peas, the frozen peas that you opened to put in some boiling water, right? But you don't really know exactly what the story was with those peas before they got into the bag or before the bag got to the supermarket. So you do have to use your imagination. Now, it's an interesting exercise to actually find out where peas came from or anything else, because all kinds of interesting stuff can come out of that. Like you might start learning about farm workers and the way farm workers live and what the difficulties are for being a farm worker. And you might learn about what it's like to be a truck driver, because truck drivers have to deliver the peas. That's how they get to the store. That's how they get to the plant, probably, that freezes the peas. So in a sense, this is an intellectual exercise, and you can think of it as being unmindful. So you have to be careful because you want to be mindful at the same time. I mean, you really want to get into it. You want to taste the peas for this to be really effective. And I'll tell you what I mean by effective in just a minute. And because effective doesn't just mean, okay, yeah, these are really peas. I mean, these are peas, and so now what does that mean? Well, peas come from the ground, there's water to nourish them and so on and so forth. That's not what I mean. I mean, that's all true. And it's worth thinking about. And again, I'll go to my own experience of doing this practice because I've been doing this for years off and on. What I find comes up out of this is gratitude. Now, gratitude is a very interesting kind of feeling. I don't tend to notice a lot of Dharma teachers talking about gratitude. I mean, when you talk about the 6 perfections, gratitude is not one of the 6 perfections. Yet it does arise, I think, spontaneously from a realistic bringing together of mindfulness and the intellect and imagination to see the complex matrix that we're in of all the causes and conditions that bring about a moment's experience, like enjoying a mouthful of peas and really getting into the peas and really enjoying the taste of them, And what I find comes out of that is this experience of gratitude. Now, again, I have to talk for myself only. I mean, Dharma teachers usually like to talk in the abstract. They'll talk about karma or this, that, or the other thing. What the feminists critiquing the notions of objective knowledge in the 1980s made abundantly clear is there is no such thing as completely objective knowledge. You pardon me for putting on my professor hat for a moment, but everything that we call objective knowledge is something we know or believe because we know it and we believe it. There's this old saying, which is, at least in the United States, I don't know about in Liverpool, but in the United States, there's this old saying, which is seeing is believing. And I once shocked, that's in Liverpool too? Okay. So I once shocked a friend of mine in Eastern Oregon, which is where I lived for 14 years, by saying that's not true. Believing is seeing. And she kind of looked at me like, huh? And we talked about it for a minute, and it became clear to her that that's true. And it turned her life around in some weird way. Believing is seeing. What we believe to be true is what we see. I mean, Kay was in a fossil shop the other day, And the owner of the fossil shop was talking to somebody on a speakerphone. And this person on the speakerphone was going on about the way in which all this stuff about vaccines, they're trying to kill us with vaccines. Now, the person at the other end of this line really absolutely believed that the government had a plot going, which was going to poison, if not kill, people with vaccines. Well, in my reality, it's the reverse. In my reality, vaccines are keeping people out of the hospital. In this person's reality, vaccines are putting people in the hospital, right? Well, I'm not an immunologist and I'm not an MD, so I can't say that I can actually produce facts which will prove that I'm right and the dude on the other end of the line is wrong. But he can't produce any facts either. But the consensus view of people who have an intelligence is that vaccines do keep people out of the hospital. Although I know some very intelligent people who believe that vaccines are a plot and that you're much better off injecting yourself with baking soda or something like that. I mean, I don't know. I've seen some pretty weird shit. Pardon me. I've seen pretty weird stuff on Facebook. So I don't actually, I don't know what some of these people believe. So I'm willing to grant that everyone's got a right to their own opinion, although I'm not willing to grant that everyone has a right to make other people sick. I think I sort of stop at that particular point. So without going too far down this line, I'm going to say, if you don't want to get vaccinated and you don't believe in it, okay, but at least wear a face mask. And an inability to wear a face mask or an unwillingness is a sign of an unbelievable social irresponsibility. Okay, enough of that, because I was in the hardware store today and I saw some stuff that kind of shocked me along those lines, so it's on my mind. Anyhow, back to this guy on the telephone. So what he believes is that people are going to the hospital because they're vaccinated, not because they're unvaccinated. And he's convinced of it. Believing is seeing. He sees it. But the truth of the matter is, in general, believing is seeing. What we believe is what we're going to see, because we're not open to seeing things we don't believe in. Okay. So why did I go down this line? Now I have to remind myself why I went down this line. I can't remember why I went down this line. I got completely sidetracked by my own reactions to the stuff that happened when I went shopping today. Well, maybe that's another example of believing and seeing. The way we're emotionally attuned is responsible for what we see going on in the world. Anyhow, how we tune ourselves with our imagination to this kind of exercise of bringing our mind and our imagination together with the actual mindfulness of what we're doing has very interesting outcomes. In my experience, the most interesting outcome is gratitude. Okay. And gratitude's an interesting experience. It doesn't come naturally to a lot of people. It certainly didn't come naturally to me. I attribute that to my Jewishness. If you're Jewish, I think you tend to see the glass half empty rather than half full. If you see it half full, I think you're more grateful than if you see it half empty. And my family always saw the glass at least more than half empty, no matter how full it actually was. It was always at least half empty. So this practice is really transformative. It changes the emotional relationship that you have with the phenomena going on around you. Now, Lama Zopa is going to take it in the direction of bodhicitta, of recognizing that you have some kind of relationship with the people and the circumstances that are around you that make these experiences possible, like walking down the sidewalk or having peas on your spoon. And I think that that's all true. But he doesn't say anything about gratitude. I mean, I went through this section and that kind of surprised me because in my experience anyway, gratitude is sort of an in-between step. That what comes out of gratitude naturally is a sense of appreciation of others and a concern for others, because you feel that gratitude toward others, that it opens the heart up and it opens the relationship up toward other people. And that a sense of concern for others becomes natural when that happens. It's not something that is that you put on like a set of clothes. I mean, there are practices in Buddhism where you try and develop bodhicitta, you try and develop compassion for others. And you work on it, you imagine certain kind of relationships. And then the imagination leads to having some sort of sense of that relationship. But I think that this is more powerful because there's something sensory about sinking your teeth into the peas. There's something sensory about putting your foot on the sidewalk. There's something very sensory, about appreciating the clean air that you can breathe when you think about the fact that you can breathe clean air or that you can drink clean water. And I think that sensoriness takes the abstraction away, but that the abstraction is necessary to understand the relationships, because otherwise the peas are just on your plate. I mean, the truth of the matter is that they're simply on your plate because we're time bound. We can't really see the long expanse of time and the cause and effect chains that have brought all this stuff to your plate. Now, there's something else that begins to arise with this practice, which is very important in terms of understanding the Dharma. And that's a different way, and again, I'm speaking from my experience, that's a different way of understanding karma. Now, karma is usually said to be an extremely difficult and abstract kind of a topic, which is not untrue. I mean, it is true. But what karma, I mean, the word karma as a Sanskrit word simply means action, okay? So what karma refers to is the chain of actions and reactions, causes and effects, right? That is involved in any phenomenon that occurs and is involved in any phenomenon that will occur. So everything you do has a consequence because you are the cause of things that are going to happen. And everything that happens to you is a consequence of causes and effects, right? I mean, there were people involved in picking the peas, presumably, that got into the bag that got frozen, that got delivered by a truck to Sprout Supermarket, that I picked up and brought home and put in my freezer, and then I boiled for dinner tonight, right? I mean, that's the causal chain of events. And there are many elements that are involved in that. In fact, there's so many elements that are involved in that you can't really piece them out. And if you think about the whole complex of what goes on in your life, moment by moment, there are phenomenal numbers of causes and conditions that are wrapped up in each moment of whatever happens to you, right? So it's effectively impossible to isolate a single cause that's responsible for a single effect that happens to you, except in rare circumstances. I mean, I can think about the last time that my car had a close encounter with somebody else's car and actually totaled my car. And I know what the causes and the conditions were for that in a limited way. I mean, I was looking left when I should have been looking right. The person that backed out in front of me should have been looking at me and wasn't looking at me at all, right? And those two moments came together and kablooey, that was the end of my car. But there were more causes and conditions that brought all that together. Why was I in that location at that particular time? Why was this lady backing out of her garage at that particular time. And, you know, you can go on and on. A lot of times people will ask the question, why did this horrible thing happen to me or this other person? Because it doesn't seem like there's a good reason for it to happen. Especially if the other person seems to be a nice person or an innocent child or something like that. But the reality is there's such an incredible number of causes and conditions that it's impossible to know. Yet on the other hand, Buddhism asserts very strongly that everything is dependent on causes and conditions, and nothing is random. It might seem random because of the extraordinary complexity of the causes and conditions. That doesn't make it random. And then the question comes up, and by the way, this is still all related to what I started talking about here. And then the question comes up, well, if everything is a result of causes and conditions, how do we have any choice? A friend of mine once asked about free will. We didn't get too far into this conversation about free will, but whoever said there was such a thing as free will? I mean, that's a philosophical concept. I don't know what free will might conceivably refer to. I mean, you don't have free will to, well, for example, I live near the Santa Fe airport. It's not within the realm of my free will to get on a private jet and go visit my brother in Dublin. Why? Well, because I'm not a wealthy person. If I was a wealthy person, I could do it, right? It has nothing to do with will. And in a sense, it has nothing to do with karma. In a sense, it does have something to do with karma, right? But the fact that we're enmeshed in complex causes and conditions, circumstances that come up, doesn't mean we don't have choice, because we do have choice within limits. I mean, I can buy a plane ticket to travel coach class to Dublin if I want to, right? I just can't travel on a private jet. So I do have choices. They're delimited. So that's a metaphor for everything that comes up. So if we come back to this kind of exercise of looking at moment by moment, the complexity of causes and conditions that we're enmeshed in, we can also see where we have choice. We can see where we don't have choice. If we look closely, we can make choices or not make choices. So one of the things that comes out of this, ironically, in addition to gratitude, again, from my experience, is a sense of freedom. You wouldn't think freedom would come out of this, but it does, because you see what's actually going on. And because you see what's going on, you can make choices about what to do about what's going on. Now that's powerful, not just in the present, but in the future, because everything we do has consequences, right? So we're accumulating the causes of future circumstances. When I was young, you know, the big thing that people talked about when they're in college anyway, at that time, was delayed gratification. Like, okay, we're putting up with all this stuff that we have to put up with, because what that means is our lives will be improved later. So we're willing to put up with stuff now that we don't really care for, so that later is better. That's deferred gratification. But that's actually kind of like a Buddhist principle, right? It's called accumulating merit in Buddhism. If you want positive things to come to you, they will, provided you create the causes for positive things to come to you in the future. Now, it can also be argued that if positive things come to you in the present, that's because you created the causes for positive things in the past. And if negative things come to you in the present, it's because you created the causes for negative things to come to you through actions in the past. So what do you do about that? I mean, do you feel gratitude for the negative things that come in your direction? I mean, there is a Buddhist teaching that you can, because that means you're finishing off the karma that's associated with whatever brought the negative thing to you. You know, it's like if you're suffering, you have some responsibility for that having happened. So if you experience it now, you've used up the consequence, you've used up in some way that karma, right? It's ripened on you and you're finished with it. Well, maybe if you're a bodhisattva, you can feel that way. I find it not quite easy to appreciate and be grateful for the horrible stuff that happens to me. I went through about 4 years of profound insomnia, where I didn't sleep more than a couple of hours a night. If that happens to somebody, they start living in everything that I would refer to as hell. That's a hell realm. I cannot describe to you the misery of that situation. It took me a long time to recognize that in some way I had to accept responsibility for being in that situation. That doesn't mean that I was grateful, unfortunately, that I was grateful to be in that situation. However, there are other feelings that can come up. Guilt would not be a useful one, but remorse would be useful. And Buddhists do talk about remorse, because you can be remorseful for having done something in the past. And if you feel remorse, you can make a strong decision that you're never going to do it again. So I said earlier, I don't do prayers at the beginning of these kind of classes because they're sort of like intellectual academic type talks. But that doesn't mean I don't pray, as I said, but it also doesn't mean that I don't feel things like remorse as a practice. I'm not recommending it to you as a practice, but it can come up and it can be very useful. It's certainly more useful than guilt, which is utterly useless. It goes nowhere. There's nothing useful about guilt at all. I say that on the basis of the Dalai Lama talking about that. Once again, being Jewish, I know a lot about guilt, but His Holiness says that it's a useless emotion. It's like anger, which is a useless emotion, right? I mean, you can turn anger around so you can do something useful with it, but in and of itself, it's useless. The same with remorse. You can be remorseful about the things that come your direction that you take responsibility for that are not positive. And you can turn them so that you can see a positive outcome. I'm not going to do that again, kind of thing. Now, what's difficult is you may not know the specific causes that brought you happiness, or the specific causes that brought you unhappiness. So you may not even know what it is you're supposed to be remorseful about. I mean, I have no idea what was responsible ultimately for my insomnia. I know the trigger, irresponsible medical people, in fact, right? And I know that my reaction to that was embedded in the problem. But I don't know what caused 4 years of this problem. But I'll take it for granted that I'm responsible in some way. Because otherwise you're living in a universe that lacks coherence, that there are effects without logical causes that are responsible for them. I don't choose to live in that world. I don't think any of us want to live in that world, or we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be Dharma students, right? Okay. So then you can turn this exercise around. It's the point of where I'm going here. From experiencing gratitude and remorse for things that are happening by seeing causes and conditions that come up, or believing that there are causes and conditions even when you don't see them. And you can turn them so you can think about what's going on in the future. Lama Zopa talks about dedication, and he talks about motivation. And that's where dedication and motivation come in. Because you can turn this so that you can be eating the peas to be of benefit. right? It's like, okay, I'm eating these peas to be healthy, not just because the peas taste good, but eating the peas will make me healthy. That will make me strong. That will empower me to do things in this world which may benefit other people. Okay. So if you know that that's where things are going in the future, then your intention can be to eat in a way which is beneficial. And by the way, for those of us who have to be on diets, that's a very useful way to cope with being on a diet. You know, not just say, oh my God, I can't eat this. It's bad for my cholesterol, right? I can't eat this. It's bad for my blood pressure. But more, I shouldn't eat this because if I don't, then I'm going to be healthier. And if I'm healthier, then I can be of benefit to other people. If I'm healthier, I can help take care of my wife instead of being somebody that she has to take care of, right? Because if my health breaks down, she will take care of me. And I'll appreciate that. But why should she have to do that? If I can make choices that make it possible for her to not have to do that, so she can spend her time in other ways. I mean, it can be that simple. We don't have to talk about bodhicitta in relationship to gazillions of sentient beings. We can think about it just from the point of view of the person we're in relationship with, or our children, if we're elderly, you know, so they don't have to take care of us, or whatever, you know, whatever the possibilities are. So this is looking at this exercise in the future. Where are things going? What are the consequences of what I'm doing? And if you practice understanding how things come to you by seeing the complex causes and conditions in your imagination and in what's presented to you, it's easier to see where things are going. And it's easier to make commitments to where things are going. Okay. I'm sounding very preachy, but I'm sorry about that. But this is the kind of stuff that's been on my mind recently. I'm talking about insomnia because thank God I'm free of the insomnia, so I can talk about it now. And I can talk about thinking about where things are going and gratitude because this is something that I'm experiencing. So then there's one other thing that I want to talk about that comes out of this kind of practice that Lama Zopa describes in such great detail, but again, from the point of view of bodhicitta, you know, walking with bodhicitta, eating with bodhicitta, and I'm seeing it more broadly. Something else that comes out of this, and this is a word, this is a concept that I don't see any place in Buddhism anymore, but I used to, and I don't exactly know what happened to it. And the term is contentment. Contentment, being content, being okay with things as they are, and actually being more than okay with things as they are, being quite happy and at peace with things as they are. You would think that this would be something that a lot of people in the Dharma would talk about, and I don't see it. I'm not exactly sure why. I mean, this afternoon, I was lying on the couch and I was feeling very content about things. You know, I'm living in this nice house with this wonderful person that I'm married to, and my health is okay, and neither of us is experiencing any pain. It's cold outside, but the heat comes on. It's like, how nice is all that, right? I mean, it's easy to take all that stuff for granted, but when you start seeing yourself in this larger picture of things and feeling how it comes to you and where it's going and feeling gratitude, I think contentment arises naturally out of that. I remember that when I didn't know anything about Buddhism, and I would see images of the Buddha and people would talk about the Buddha, the term that would come up a lot was serenity. And I don't see people in the Dharma talking about serenity. But, you know, 60, 65 years ago, people look at images of the Buddha and they would talk about serenity. Maybe that's because everybody was so stressed out, alienated from their lives, and worried about nuclear annihilation that nobody really experienced anything coming close to serenity. When they saw images of the Buddha, they looked at somebody that looked serene. Well, the Buddha is serene. He's at complete peace. Right? Well, how did he get there? I mean, the Buddha was a person. Shakyamuni was a person who went from being more or less ordinary to more or less not even a little bit ordinary. How did he get there? Well, that's what I've been talking about. It's part of the way in which he got there, as far as I can see. I'm not saying I'm on the way to being a Buddha. Well, theoretically, I am. I've taken my bodhisattva vows. But there are all kinds of pleasant things that come out of this process for ourselves, even if we're looking at the larger picture. Americans, anyway, are known for being people who are always striving after something. So in Zen, they say there's nothing to be achieved, which kind of bollocksed up people's minds when they first heard that. You know, there's nothing to be achieved because you already have within you everything that's necessary. I don't know if I completely agree with that. I think achieving a little contentment is really wonderful. But of course, you can't get it by reaching for it. It has to come up naturally. But it does. And that's my experience, but it does. So that's the icing on this cake, as far as I can see, is that this comes up naturally. This has been a very preachy talk, so I'm sorry about that. I hate doing that kind of stuff, but I was very moved, by some things that happened to me today, and I really felt that they illustrated a lot of what I've been talking about here, and more importantly, a lot of what Lama Zopa was talking about in his book, How to Make Life Meaningful. It's real. It really can happen. I guess that's really what I want to be saying here. Okay. I don't have a single other thing to say. So that's it for me for tonight. And I am very open to people asking questions, making comments, or whatever the case may be. So I turn it over to all of you. And if nobody has anything to say, then we can all go and do the dishes or whatever else it is that's we need to do at this point. In my case, it's doing the dishes. Lewis, yes.
Remember last week I was talking about doing the dedications I'm now doing when I'm eating, and dedicating them to the sentient beings in my body, and the dedicating, transforming the food into nectar for my guru and all that stuff. Well, things have been changing. Now when I do it and I actually eat the food, it's like twice as delicious as it's ever been before. It really is. I mean, it's wonderful.
One of the side benefits of this. Yeah, I get it. Yeah, the peas tonight were really good. They had to be because the potatoes never got cooked. So we had a whole lot less of the meal. So the peas had to be good because that wonderful baked potato that I was looking for with much too much butter on it it did not have the causes and the conditions to manifest. I don't know how long you have to bake a potato in a Santa Fe. We have to figure this out. If anybody knows, please let me know. Anybody else have any comments? Yeah, it all tastes more wonderful. Life tastes more wonderful. Life does really taste more wonderful. I mean, that's one of the other things that's wonderful about the Dharma in general, is it makes life taste more wonderful. I can't imagine how people live without the Dharma. I just can't imagine how they can tolerate life without some kind of spiritual process. Doesn't have to be Dharma. Could be Islam, Catholicism. I don't think it matters. It's the non-believers. I don't know how they get on. I really don't. Sorry for any non-believers around. Colin is smiling. Okay. Anybody else? No? All right.
Just a basic one, really, David, which is with my own experience with gratitude, it has a massive effect on how I treat myself and behave and what opportunities I go for. So, I mean, it's a particular nun, should we say, she said to me, you know, your winds change so quickly, but it's how I think. It literally is. So 2 weeks ago was completely different to today. You know, as I was in my room looking at all my beautiful new clothes for my new job, and I've chucked a load of crap out, which I, you know, held on to old energy, and it's just a state of mind. You know, I went for this position. I actually chucked some clothes out and bought some new ones, and it's pretty basic, really. But the action of doing it and being aware of how you're thinking, I think I need to be more aware of that because it transforms your life, gratitude.
It really does. I know. It really does. And it's really great to hear from people who can say, yeah, this worked. You know, I experienced this because there's, you know, Buddhist philosophy or Buddha Dharma can easily stay in an abstract realm, but there's no point to that. I mean, again, the Dalai Lama says, you know, Buddhist philosophy is useless unless it affects what you do in your life. My professors don't like to hear this, you know. I mean, I've spent my life talking about Buddhist philosophy in universities, but I usually try and push it in the direction of practice, put it into practice. Can only go so far where you get in trouble with the administration, you know. But so you have to be careful. But yeah. And so it's always really great to hear about people, you know, where this happens. Like my own experience, in fact, that I was sharing, or your experience, Anna. Thank you.
And David, I think I've got these two vast um like different attitudes, if you like. My mum was Jewish. So, you know, her glass was always half full and, you know, miserly, and we kept on to things, and, you know, we grew our own food as much as we can. And so I've got a bit of that mentality in me.
Of course.
So now I'm a bit more open to the world. And she was a rebel because she had me, you know, a black kid. Oh my God. So, you know, she was a bit of a rebel anyway. So I think that's why I'm quite extreme sometimes. Well, not in a like psychotic way, but you know what I mean.
Well, we're not, I mean, we're not complete, you know, we're not perfect. And this process, it's a process. You know, it's a process of like shedding something that's old and taking on something that's new. And it's stepwise and it's slow. But we can see things changing. Or if we can't, other people can sometimes see things that are changing for us. I mean, sometimes I've asked my wife, you know, whether, okay, I've been at this for a long time. Has anything happened? She'll say, yes, you're much nicer than the person I married. Okay, good. That's good. Um, okay, I'm thinking I could go on with this now with some other topic, but I don't really want to. I think I'd rather wait till next week and loop back to this with some more thoughts. And you know what I think would be really great is that if hold on a second, I'm just about to start coughing. if folks would sort of think, excuse me, folks would sort of start to think about some of the stuff that we've been talking about tonight and sort of look at it in their own experience and maybe bring some more experience of their experiences, next week. That would be good, in the way in which Anna was talking tonight, or Victor was talking the other night, or Lewis was speaking to tonight, that I was talking about tonight. Share with each other. I think that would be very useful, because we can all learn from each other. It's not, the way things are set up is I'm supposed to do the talking and you're supposed to do the listening. And, I've done everything I can to break out of that model. So let's see what we can do next week. Okay. Well, that is it for me, whether I want it to be or not, because I'm losing my voice. It's near 3 a.m. Oh my God, that's right. In the British Isles. So I'm grateful to finish a little early, as we had a very, wait a minute, I missed it. I want to get
Long.
back. A very
day.
long day. Okay, Anna. Good night. Thanks for coming at 3 a.m. or 2 a.m. or whatever.
I wouldn't miss you. I wouldn't miss you. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Thank you, everybody, for coming. And I'll be here next week. And if you can be here, that's great. If you have other things to do, that's wonderful too. So, good night.